You know, in the high-stakes world of luxury watches, data is everything. But what happens when that data goes completely off the rails? Today, we're diving into a wild story of a market panic, a digital ghost, and the real truth behind a so-called Rolex price crash.
Just jump right into the big question that sent some serious shockwaves through the watch community. For a few frantic hours, it really looked like the bottom was falling out of the pre-owned Rolex market. But did it actually happen? So this whole thing kicked off with what looked like a full-blown crisis. After months of slow, steady recovery, the numbers suddenly, and I mean suddenly, turned blood red. And the drop was fast. The index that tracks Rolex prices plunged by 1.7% in just over a week. Now, in the world of high-value assets, that's not just a little dip, that's a nosedive. To give you some perspective on that, the market had just posted a pretty respectable 1.3% gain over the entire third quarter. And then, just like that, a whole quarter's worth of progress was seemingly wiped out in less than 7 days. It looked like a total catastrophe. But then, just as everyone was starting to panic, the story took a really weird turn. As the digital dust started to settle, it became pretty clear this wasn't a market crash at all. It was something else, something technical. And then we got the first official clue that something was, well, off. The very source of the data, WatchCharts, put out a statement basically admitting there might be an issue. This was the first real crack in that story of a market collapse. So you had this bizarre situation where the charts were just screaming sell, but the people actually in the business, the pre-owned dealers, were saying something completely different. They were all reporting that prices were holding steady. It was a direct conflict between what the data said and what was happening in the real world. And here it is. Here's the culprit: a data ingestion failure. Now, that sounds super technical, but in simple terms, the system that automatically collects and calculates all the market prices just messed up. It was feeding bad information into the index, and that painted a completely false picture of the market. It was literally a ghost in the machine. Okay, so once they figured out what was actually going on and fixed the glitch, the true state of the market came into focus. And the reality, well, it was the complete opposite of all that panic. I mean, the contrast here is just stark. It's night and day. On one hand, you have the illusion created by that data error, a sharp 1.7% drop, a market in total freefall. But the reality was that the market had actually grown by 1.3% in the third quarter and was showing signs of a slow, steady recovery. So here's the bottom line, the most crucial point. There was no crash. It was a phantom, a digital error that sparked a very real, but ultimately a totally unfounded panic among collectors and investors. All right, so now that we've kinda solved the mystery of the Rolex crash that wasn't, let's zoom out a little. Because the true story of the market in that quarter wasn't about one brand falling. It was about several top brands slowly rising. Take a look at this data from a Morgan Stanley report. It shows a much healthier, much more broad-based picture. Patek Philippe was actually leading the way with a 3.9% quarterly gain. Then you had Omega at 2%, and both Rolex and Cartier were also showing positive growth. This was the real trend, a slow, incremental recovery. Now, to really understand the strength of these brands, we have to talk about a super important metric called value retention, or VR for short. It's simple, really. It just measures if a watch is selling for more or less than its retail price on the secondary market. If it has a positive VR, it means it's selling for more than what you originally paid for it. And this is where Rolex is just playing a completely different game. Across its entire catalog, Rolex models have a positive value retention of over 15%. Meanwhile, most other brands, well, they sell for around 25% below their retail price. That is a massive, massive indicator of brand power. And these numbers are always moving. For example, after a recent 15% price increase in the US, Patek Philippe's overall brand VR actually dipped into negative territory for the first time. It just goes to show you how sensitive these values are to things like retail pricing, even for the absolute top players. So, what's the big lesson here? What can we take away from this story of a phantom crash and the market's real health? Well, it really comes down to understanding the difference between real volatility and just digital noise. So let's just quickly recap the crucial points. First, we learned that the crash wasn't real at all. It was a data glitch. Second, the actual market was showing slow but steady growth. We also saw that real-world things, like a huge 39% US tariff, are the true sources of volatility, not some data error. And finally, we know that understanding value retention is absolutely key to grasping a brand's real power in this industry. And that really leaves us with one final big question, doesn't it? This whole episode is such a powerful reminder. In a market where entire fortunes can be swayed by a single data point, being able to critically question the information in front of us, well, that's not just a skill, it's a necessity. So how do we make sure we're reacting to the market itself and not just to the ghosts in the machine?
So let's talk Rolex. For years, it's been all about soaring prices, impossible waiting lists, just pure hype. But now the unthinkable is happening. Collectors are calling it a price crash. It's pretty dramatic news. So let's dive in and figure out what is really going on. Yep, you're seeing that right. 30%. That's how much some of the absolute hottest Rolex models have dropped from their crazy peaks during the pandemic. Watches that people were treating like gold bars are suddenly, well, not. But here's the thing that'll make you scratch your head. While crash sounds like a total disaster, all the experts, all the insiders are saying this is a good thing, actually a necessary thing for the market. So how in the world can a 30% price drop be good news? Let's get into it. All right, so first things first, what's happening right now? That absolute feeding frenzy between 2020 and 2022 that saw Rolex prices go to the moon, well, that's officially over. That whole era has ended, and what's left is a much more careful market. And look, we're not talking about some obscure, forgotten models here. No, we're talking about the heavy hitters, the Submariner, the Daytona, the GMT Master 2. You know, the exact watches that were selling for 2, 3, sometimes even 4 times what they cost in the store just a couple of years back.
So you gotta be asking, how did we even get here? How did things get so out of control that a correction like this was even possible? To really get it, we need to jump in the time machine and go back to what one analyst called the irrational exuberance of the pandemic years. This is the story of the great Rolex hype bubble.
Honestly, it was a perfect storm. Back in 2020, you had people stuck at home, maybe with a little extra cash, and they started buying up luxury goods. Then 2021 rolls around and the Instagram effect just takes over. Suddenly, owning a fancy watch wasn't just a hobby. It was an investment, a status symbol you had to flash. All of this peaked in 2022, when prices hit levels that were just, well, they were completely unsustainable. And if you want to see just how nuts it got, just look at the Tiffany Blue Oyster Perpetual. This watch retailed for about £5,000. At its peak, you could find it on the secondary market for over £30,000. That's a 6 times markup for a watch that, yeah, it was cool, but it wasn't some ultra-rare artifact. And that is the key. That's the whole ball game right there. As the folks at Oakley Watches UK put it so well, the prices were just completely disconnected from reality. People were paying a fortune for watches that just weren't that rare. And once that realization started to sink in, that bubble was always going to burst. But listen, this is not a story about the end of Rolex. Not even close. This is a story about a return to reality. And that's how all the experts are talking about it. This isn't a crisis. It's a healthy and frankly a long overdue market correction.
So what exactly do we mean by a correction? It's really simple. It's just a natural adjustment. When a market gets way too hot, way too fast, and becomes totally unsustainable, a correction is what brings prices back down to earth. It's the market's way of hitting the reset button.
So, why now? What popped the bubble? Well, it's basically 3 things happening at once. 1, all those dealers who are hoarding watches to keep prices high, they're now selling them off. 2, the economy is tighter, interest rates are up, and people just have less money to spend on super expensive watches. And 3, the hype is just gone. The Instagram effect has faded, the party's over. And that quote right there from a Swiss industry analyst really is the headline for this entire situation. It's not a crash in the scary sense of the word. It's just a return to reality. The market is getting back to normal after a couple of years of pure speculation. Okay, so prices are down, the hype is gone, so why is this good news? Because for a very specific group of people, this is a massive opportunity. I'm talking about the actual watch collectors, the enthusiasts, the people who are completely priced out of the market for the last few years. So where are these opportunities? You can basically break the market down into 3 tiers. Tier 1, those speculative models, like the modern Daytona or Submariner. They saw the biggest drops as all that hype just evaporated. Tier 2, the genuinely rare, discontinued models, they dipped a tiny bit, but they're pretty stable. But the real opportunity, the place to look, is Tier 3. Undervalued classics, like the 36mm Explorer. They fell more than they should have, and right now they represent incredible value for a true watch lover.
See, this downturn has really burned the people who were just trying to flip a watch for a quick profit. But for the serious collectors, the people who actually appreciate these watches for what they are, this might be the best news they've had in years. Prices are finally getting back to what the watches are actually worth.
And this quote from Box & Docs UK just says it all, doesn't it? The people who genuinely love watches are popping champagne right now. They know the secret. The absolute best time to buy a quality timepiece is when all the noise and all the hype finally dies down.
All right, so let's wrap this up by looking ahead. What does all this mean for the future of Rolex, the undisputed king of luxury watches? Well, in a nutshell, it points to a future that's much healthier and much more stable. And let's be crystal clear about this. Rolex isn't going anywhere. Go to an authorized dealer, demand is still way higher than supply. Now, those absolutely absurd prices from a couple years ago, yeah, they're probably gone for good. But the truly rare models, they're expected to recover and slowly appreciate over time. The consensus is simple. The market today is way healthier than it was during that crazy boom.
Which leaves us with one last big question. The speculative craziness is over. The market has hit the reset button. For everyone who is on the sidelines, dreaming of a Rolex but totally priced out of the craze, the question isn't if you can buy anymore, it's when. Is this the moment you've been waiting for?
Okay, so let's dive into something you see literally all the time, but probably never give a second thought. It's that tiny, everyday message that flashes on your screen, a message we all just click past without even thinking. Today, we're going to decode the redirect notice. Sound familiar? Yeah, I thought so. This right here is the mystery we're about to solve. You've seen this exact message, or something super close to it, thousands of times. But have you ever, really stopped to consider what it's telling you? What is actually happening in that split second before you click? So, what is this invisible journey your click is about to take? Let's pull back the curtain on the little bit of technical magic that's happening behind the scenes. It's a surprisingly simple idea, but it has some really important implications. And here's the key. We're going to make a distinction between the redirect itself and the notice that tells you it's happening.
At its heart, a redirect is basically just a digital forwarding address. Seriously, that's the best way to think about it. Imagine you move, and you tell the post office, hey, don't send my mail to the old house anymore, send it all to my new address. That is exactly what a website is doing. It's telling your browser, well, that content isn't here anymore, it's over there now.
It's just a simple three-step dance. You click something, the server does a quick behind-the-scenes shuffle and points you in a new direction, and boom, you land on the new page. A lot of the time, you don't even notice the switch happened. So why all the shuffling around? Well, it turns out redirects are a fundamental part of how the internet works properly. Websites use them for tons of totally legit reasons. Maybe they move to a shiny new domain name, they're cleaning up old broken links, or they're sending you to a version of the site that actually looks good on your phone. They're also used for things like tracking analytics or for affiliate links. You know, that's how a blog gets credit if you buy something they recommend. So they aren't bad, they're actually essential.
But see, the redirect itself is only half the story. The second, and you could argue more important part, is the notice. That little message, that brief pause is where the power shifts from the website right back to you.
And that is the question, isn't it? This pop-up isn't just some annoying notification, it's a fork in the road. It's presenting you with a real choice that most of us just blow right past on autopilot. But what if we didn't? What if we actually use that moment? This is the real choice you're making. Clicking proceed basically means you're saying, yep, I trust where I came from and I'm okay with where it's sending me, tracking and all. But choosing to return, that's you taking control. It's you saying, hang on a sec, I thought I was clicking on a news article, but this wants to send me to some random shopping site I've never heard of. Let me rethink this. It's a tiny click, but it's a big deal. So how do you make a smart choice in that split second? You become a digital detective. And your number one tool, your magnifying glass, is that URL the notice shows you. It is packed with clues if you know where to look. All right, here's a real-world example. I know, at first glance, it looks like a total mess, just a jumble of letters and slashes. But I promise you, it's actually telling you a complete story. Let's break it down together. First up, see that little M right at the beginning? That's our first clue. 9 times out of 10, that M stands for mobile. It's just telling you that the page you're about to land on is specifically designed to look good on a phone. Simple enough, right?
Now for the most important part of the whole thing, the domain name itself. In this case, it's economictimes.com. This is the main event. This tells you who's actually publishing the content. Is it a source you recognize? One you trust? This is the core piece of info you need to decide if you want to go forward.
And finally, check out the rest of the URL. You can often see the actual headline of the article right there in the link. Look at this. You see words like Rolex prices 2025 and Trump's tariff. Before the page even loads, before you see a single ad or image, you know exactly what this story is about. You've just read the cliff notes of your next click.
So let's bring this all home. The goal here is to completely shift our perspective. That redirect notice isn't an annoying roadblock. It's not just an extra useless click. Think of it as a helpful signpost on the digital highway. It's a moment of awareness.
Think of it this way. That notice is your personal checkpoint. It's a transparency tool showing you what's going on behind the scenes. It acts like a little security guard, giving you that crucial pause before you jump to an unfamiliar website. And most importantly, that return to previous page link, that's your empowerment button.
And that's what it all boils down to. 1. A single, simple choice that you, the user, get to make every single time. It's about taking back a fraction of a second to be an active, aware participant in your journey across the web, instead of just being a passive passenger along for the ride. So the next time that little box pops up, don't just click through on instinct. Take that half second, glance at the URL. Recognize that this tiny, overlooked notice is actually handing you the controls. It's giving you a choice. The only real question left is, are you going to start using it?